After rejecting the 999th consort candidate my master, Madame Freya, had introduced to me, she finally reached her limit. What the hell are you waiting for? You're the once-in-a-lifetime genius of Nymphomist magic, and yet you've never gone through the great rite. You're not getting any younger, girl. At this rate, how are you supposed to improve your spiritual power? I sighed. Of course I wanted to find a consort and perform the great rite already, but every single one of those candidates looked like shit. Unfortunately, my absurdly high standards for men ended up stalling my spiritual power for too long. I failed to survive the trial of lightning and died. Then I opened my eyes and realized I was in another body, in another world. The beauty standards here were completely different from those in the elven world. I looked across the room, and my eyes immediately landed on the most perfect man I had ever seen. He was 6 feet 2 inches, with sharply defined washboard abs. His face looked as though the gods themselves had sculpted it. I ran straight toward him and threw my arms around his waist. Oh, he's the one. To my surprise, this god among men narrowed his eyes and grabbed me by the neck. Rage burned in his expression. You would throw yourself at a man as hideous as me just for my money. You disgust me. What the hell was he talking about? Honestly, all I could focus on was the way his sexy, seductive lips moved against each other whenever he spoke. Please, just let me bite them already. I sensed cold steel against my wrists and shivered as I opened my eyes. A bed covered in pink sheets came into view, but my attention quickly shifted to the man standing against the light. The sight of him immediately set my throat on fire. He stood at least 6 feet 2 inches, his compact frame carrying an unmistakable air of dominance. The first 2 buttons of his dress shirt hung open, exposing the sharp outline of his collarbones and the smooth, powerful planes of his chest. But his face. Holy shit. Those deep, endless eyes. That sculpted, almost elven nose. Those thin, supple lips pressed into a seductive frown. I gasped. My gaze locked onto his washboard abs and refused to move. He was a god among men. There was no way he could be anything less. Huh. Oh Lord. This fine specimen had spoken, and his voice carried a magnetic, sensual baritone. The sound clashed sharply with the deep self-loathing woven into his tone. I knew it. It doesn't matter if I'm the richest man in the world. Even money can't soften this cursed, hideous appearance. His expression darkened. Now that you've seen how repulsive I really am, get out. He bent toward me and unlocked the pink handcuffs around my wrists. Frankly, I was too stunned to move. How the hell was I supposed to process the insane thing he had just said? A dreamboat like this was calling himself ugly? The man dialed a string of numbers and barked coldly. Get your daughter away from me. The door opened, and a middle-aged couple entered with nervous, lowered heads. They were probably the parents of this body's original owner. Both trembled visibly, though disgust still flickered through their fear-stricken eyes. And Mr. Valencia? My bum of a father stammered. I swear Cher is genuinely in love with you. Please accept her feelings, sir. Let her stay. My equally awful mother rushed to add. Yeah, and if you could invest in our company, Cher is all yours. But of course, I can assure you she's here of her own volition. I stared at them in disbelief. Had I really just watched a couple try to barter their daughter for money in this day and age? Did I hear that right? I was practically half undressed over here, and instead of reacting to that, these two were openly trying to sell me off for cash right in front of me. Mateo Valencia suddenly let out a scornful laugh. Eyes over here, Mr. and Mrs. Monroe. Surely my future parents-in-law should like me enough to want me in their family, right? So look at me. If either of you can stare at me for more than 10 seconds without looking away, you get your money. My crappy parents exchanged excited glances before turning toward Mateo. That's almost too easy, Mr. Valencia. You're such an exceptional young. Fine. Emma. My father gagged uncontrollably, and Mateo's mood darkened at once. The air in the room seemed to turn cold. Fantastic. Just fantastic, Mateo snarled. Meanwhile, I stared at him in complete fascination. Crap. He looked so hot when he was angry. I couldn't hold back anymore. I lunged at him and wrapped my arms around his slender waist. The force of the movement buried my face deep against his muscles. Oh God, he smelled incredible. The instant our bodies touched, a wave of pure, nearly tangible energy seeped into my skin. It poured straight into my source, the place where all my spirit energy was stored. Shock rippled through me. This godly man was more than eye candy. He was a literal mother lode of the power I craved. He stiffened violently. What the hell are you doing? He tried to shove me away, but I moved faster. My hand slipped beneath his shirt and traced the hard warmth of his abs in all their glory. Oh, the shape of you, these ridges and edges. I moaned, drunk on the sensation as I leaned down to kiss his deliciously compact abs. Now this is what I call a true man. Mateo froze like he'd been struck by lightning. You just kissed. Mateo looked pale. Confusion battled across his face, breaking through his usual cynical expression. You don't think my abs are disgusting? I shook my head wildly and fixed my gaze on his chest. I grabbed one of his pecs and squeezed. These muscles had to be sculpted by the gods themselves. Handsome. Who the hell would think they're disgusting? I meant every word. His musculature looked sharper and more refined than that of my fellow Nymphomist peers who devoted themselves to swordplay and combat. Mateo's body jolted at the sensation of my grip. He stepped away from me as though my hand were a burning iron. Fury slowly replaced the panic in his eyes. Enough, he roared, his chest heaving with heavy breaths. The sudden movement sent me flipping backward onto the bed. Memories rushed into my mind. Damn. Now I remembered what kind of world this was. It was no wonder Mateo kept insisting he was hideous. The masculine beauty standard here was completely different from the elven worlds. In this world, the hottest men had to be around 5 feet 3 inches, weigh 200 pounds, and possess flat, rotund faces with barely visible necks. The larger and rounder, the better. On the other hand, a man with an exquisitely sculpted body and face like Mateo's would only be regarded as a freak of nature. I inhaled sharply and looked at him again. My pleasant surprise had evolved into sheer ecstasy. This man had been bullied since childhood for his ugliness. His parents hated him, and his peers ostracized him. Even after becoming the richest man on the planet through his ruthless business acumen, people still would not stop talking about how no amount of wealth could make him easier on the eyes. No one had ever wanted to pursue him romantically. Hell, the only reason the original owner of my body was here was that her parents had forcefully separated her from her childhood sweetheart and dragged her into Mateo's bed for the sake of money. Madame Freya had once told me about men like this. There was no easier target under the sun than an insecure man who had never been loved. My eyes drank him in again and again. I had never felt so satisfied with my luck. And those sexy lips. Their shape alone was mesmerizing. And the way the light caught their color made them even more irresistible. What would happen if I kissed them? Would I absorb even more energy that way? God, I could barely contain my excitement anymore. I lunged again and pressed my lips against his with precise, reckless force. The world went silent. My parents looked so stunned that I swore their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Mateo froze as his eyes widened further and further. Spirit energy, 10 times more powerful than what I had absorbed earlier, surged through our mouths and flooded my entire body. It poured into my barren source, rejuvenated my veins, and nourished my starved body so thoroughly that I nearly moaned. Unable to help myself, I flicked my tongue across the corner of his lips as though searching for stray drops. Mateo shoved me away in shock. I stumbled and crashed back onto the bed, surprised that it didn't hurt at all. I turned my focus inward toward my source, and realized that a wisp of energy had begun filling the emptiness inside me before forming a weak barrier around my organs. Hot damn. So this was the only way for me to recover my lost magic. Intimacy with him. I caught the fear and shock in Mateo's eyes, and decided to press my advantage. I pounced like a homing missile and grabbed his thighs. He reeled backward, dumbfounded, then stared down at me with a mixture of bewilderment, humiliation, and disgust. This is how low you'd go for money. I looked up at him, love practically bubbling in my eyes. Excuse me? Forget money. Letting a manifestation of masculine hotness like you walk free is the real loss I can't afford. The entire room gasped. A faint blush spread across Mateo's face. He was blushing. Then hesitantly he asked, "You are not repulsed?" How could I posse? Suddenly, the door burst wide open. A short, rotund man barreled inside, breathing hard as he grabbed my hand. "Don't be scared, Cher. I've come to rescue you. We shall flee together." The man who had just burst into the room was, by the standards of my past elven life, a tragedy of biological geometry. He stood at a proud 5'2". His body was a perfect, unobstructed sphere, with shoulders that sloped directly into his hips like a pear wrapped in cheap denim. He possessed 3 distinct, trembling chins that completely swallowed his neck, and his cheeks were so round they pushed his eyes into 2 tiny, greasy slits. He was sweating profusely, a thin sheen of oil reflecting the pink hue of the bedroom lamps. To this world, he was a devastatingly handsome prince. To me, he looked like a slightly bruised turnip that had somehow learned to walk and wear sneakers. "Cher," the turnip gasped, clutching my hand with his damp, fleshy fingers. "I've bypassed the guards. I know your greedy parents forced you into the bed of this towering skeletal freak. Do not fear, my love. I will take you away from this nightmare." He glared up at Mateo, which required him to tilt his head back so far I feared his head might roll off his non-existent neck. "Valencia," the turnip squeaked, his voice a high-pitched self-righteous rattle. "You may be the richest man on earth, but you cannot buy Cher's heart. Look at you. You're practically a beanpole. You have muscles like a common manual laborer, and your jaw is so sharp it looks like it was chipped out of cheap granite. How dare you force your hideous self on a delicate flower like her?" Mateo didn't move, but his expression, which had briefly softened under my enthusiastic kiss, closed up instantly. The pale, vulnerable blush on his cheeks turned into a cold, stony gray. I didn't force her, Matteo said, his voice dropping into a quiet, dangerous register. Her parents brought her. But if she wants to leave with you, Peter, she is free to go. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a sudden, devastating return of his deep self-loathing. He expected me to run. He expected me to throw myself into the arms of this handsome, round stud, and leave him alone in his cold, empty bedroom. My parents immediately chimed in, their faces filled with panic. Peter, what are you doing here? My father roared, grabbing Peter's collar. Get out. You're ruining our company's future. Cher, don't listen to him. Look at his bank account, it's empty. But look at his face, father. My mother wept, pointing at Peter's round, greasy cheeks. He is so beautiful. He has the perfect double chin. Cher, I know. It's hard to sleep next to a monster like Mr. Valencia, but you must think of the family. I stood on the pink bed, looking at the turnip, then at my parents, and finally, at Matteo, who was already turning his back to me, preparing to retreat into his hollow, lonely shell. Are you all completely out of your minds? I yelled. I yanked my hand free from Peter's damp grip with enough force to send him stumbling backward. I stepped off the bed, bypassed the turnip entirely, and threw myself straight onto Matteo's back. The warmth. I groaned, wrapping my legs around Matteo's waistband, burying my face against his broad, muscular back. The moment our bodies collided, another massive wave of pure, crystalline spirit energy surged from his spine straight into my chest. My source, which had been a dry, dusty cavern just 10 minutes ago, let out a metaphorical sigh of relief. The silver light of Nymphomist magic began to ripple through my veins, repairing the physical exhaustion of this weak, human body. He was a walking, breathing ley line of pure magical power, and I was not letting go. Cher, Peter gasped, his round face turning a dark, bruised plum color. Why are you hugging him? He's practically flat. He doesn't even have a belly. Get away from me, you greasy turnip. I barked, tightening my grip around Matteo's neck. You look like a sack of wet potatoes that sat in the sun too long. You want me to flee with you? To where? A salad bar. Cher, my mother shrieked, clutching her chest. How can you speak to Peter like that? He's the most attractive bachelor in our district. Then your district is a biological hazard. I retorted. I rested my chin on Matteo's shoulder, looking at his profile. Up close, the sharp, elegant line of his jaw and the dark, thick lashes of his eyes made my mouth water. Look at my man. He's 6'2" of pure, sculpted perfection. His collarbones are like art, and his chest could stop a dragon's breath. If any of you call him ugly again, I'll personally turn you into frogs. Matteo froze. The muscles of his back, which had been tense and rigid, slowly began to soften. He turned his head slightly, his dark eyes looking at me with a mixture of sheer bewilderment, suspicion, and a strange, quiet wonder. You really think I'm perfect? He asked, his voice carrying a soft, hesitant quality that completely broke my heart. I think you're a god, Matteo, I said, leaning forward to bite his earlobe. Gently. A low, involuntary gasp escaped his lips, and a sudden, violent shudder went through his entire frame. The rush of spirit energy that followed was so intense that my eyes flashed with a faint, silver light. My source was filling up. At this rate, I'd be able to cast basic levitation spells by midnight. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, Matteo said, his voice suddenly reclaiming its cold, absolute authority as he looked at my parents. The investment in your company is approved. The funds will be transferred by morning. My parents' eyes lit up with greedy joy. However, Matteo continued, his dark eyes narrowing as he glared at Peter, if I ever see this round gentleman near my estate again, I will default your company's loans and buy your family's land just to turn it into a garbage dump. Do I make myself clear? Yes. Yes, Mr. Valencia. My father stammered, dragging a protesting, weeping Peter toward the door. We're leaving right now. Cher, be good to Mr. Valencia. They scrambled out of the room, slamming the door behind them. The room went quiet, save for the sound of our breathing. I was still clinging to Matteo's back like a very determined, very thirsty koala. You can let go now, he said, though he didn't make any move to pull my arms away. No, I mumbled, pressing my lips against the back of his neck. It's cold. You're warm. And you smell like cedar and dark chocolate. Matteo let out a ragged breath. He reached behind him, his large, calloused hands gently grabbing my hips and lifting me off his back. He set me down on the pink bed, then took a step back, running a hand through his dark, messy hair. He looked at me, his eyes dark and scanning my face for any sign of deceit. I know what you're doing, Cher, he said, his voice returning to its usual cynical baritone one. You're smart. You realize that playing hard to get wouldn't work with a man like me, so you're using reverse psychology. You're Pretending to find me attractive so I'll trust you, so I'll let my guard down. And give your family more money. I sat on the edge of the bed, swinging my legs. Matteo, if I wanted your money, I would have asked for a check, not a kiss one. Do you have any idea how much effort it takes to kiss someone you find repulsive? He flinched slightly, his gaze dropping to his own hands. Everyone finds me repulsive. Since I was a child, my mother refused to look at me. The girls at school used to throw rocks at me and call me the skeleton freak. Even my business partners only shake my hand because they want my signature on a contract. I felt a sudden sharp pang of genuine anger on his behalf. How could a society be so blind to treat a masterpiece of masculine beauty like a piece of trash just because they preferred round, bloated turnips? I stood up, walking slowly toward him. He tried to step back, but I reached out, my fingers wrapping around his wrist. Matteo, look at me, I said, my voice soft but filled with the ancient, unyielding authority of an elven high priestess. He looked down, his dark eyes meeting mine. Your mother was a fool, I said. The girls at your school were blind, and your business partners are idiots. You are the most beautiful man I have ever seen in 2 lifetimes. And if you don't believe me, I took his hand and placed it flat against my chest, right over my pounding heart. Use your money. Hire the best lie detector experts in the world. Have them ask me if I find you attractive. I swear to you, Matteo, the machine will break before it finds a single lie in my heart. Matteo's hand tensed against my chest. He could feel the rapid, wild beat of my heart, and he could see the absolute, unwavering sincerity in my eyes. For 30 seconds he stood there, completely paralyzed, his mind struggling to process a reality that went against everything he had been taught since childhood. I'm taking you to my penthouse, he said suddenly, his grip on my wrist tightening, though not enough to hurt. If this is a trap, Cher, I'll find out. But until then, you stay with me. Oh, gladly, handsome. I smiled, a little silver spark of magic dancing at the tips of my fingers. Lead the way. Matteo's penthouse was a monument to wealth and isolation. It occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest glass tower in the city center. The walls were made of solid, reinforced glass, offering a panoramic view of the glittering skyline below. The decor was minimal, painted in dark grays and cold steels, the home of a man who believed he was a monster and preferred to live in a gilded cage. This is your room, Matteo said, opening a door to a spacious, elegant suite. The staff will bring you whatever clothes you need. Don't leave the tower without my permission. Are you keeping me as a prisoner, Mr. Valencia? I asked, leaning against the doorframe and arching an eyebrow. I'm keeping you where I can see you, he said coldly. Good. Because I like it when you look at me, I smiled. Over the next 3 days, my life became a blissful routine of magical cultivation. Every evening, Matteo would return from his corporate office, looking tired and stressed. And every evening, I would find a reason to touch him. I would adjust his tie, brush a stray hair from his forehead, or simply hold his hand as we sat at the dining table. With every touch, the silver Nymphomist magic in my source grew stronger. I had already mastered basic telekinesis and could make light objects float. But to reach the mid-tier spells, like the charm of whispers or the mirror of desires, I needed something deeper. I needed the great Rite, or at least a significant level of intimacy. But Matteo was cautious. He was like a feral wolf that had been kicked too many times. Even when offered a warm meal, he kept his teeth bared, waiting for the trap to spring. On the 4th day, Oliver, Matteo's personal secretary, walked into the penthouse holding a gold-embossed invitation. Mr. Valencia, the annual High Society Charity Gala is tonight, Oliver said, his head lowered. The board of directors of the Sinclair Group will be there. They are your main rivals for the upcoming port merger. They've already leaked rumors to the press that you won't attend because of your appearance. Matteo's jaw tightened. I'm not going. But Mr. Valencia, if you don't show up, the shares will drop, and the Sinclair Group will use your absence to claim you lack the confidence to run the merger. Oliver pleaded. I stepped out of the kitchen, holding a glass of iced juice. Why shouldn't he go? He should go, and he should take me as his date. Oliver looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. Ms. Monroe, you don't understand. The media at these events is brutal. They will write articles about Mr. Valencia's grotesque tall frame, and they will mock you for being with him. Let them write. I sneered, taking a sip of my juice. I've been wanting to see how this world's high society behaves. Besides, it's about time everyone realized what a real man looks like. I turned to Matteo, walking over to stand close to him. I reached out, my fingers gently tracing the sharp, elegant outline of his collarbone through his silk shirt. Let's go, Matteo. I whispered, my voice carrying a soft, magical vibration. Let me show them what belongs to me. Matteo looked down at me, his chest rising and falling in a heavy breath. The silver energy in his source was humming, responding to my touch like a dormant volcano. Get the suits ready, Oliver, Matteo said, his voice deep and dark. We're going. The grand ballroom of the Sinclair Plaza was a sea of round faces, layers of velvet, and heavy, expensive jewelry. The studs of the city's high society were parading around, their short, rotund bodies draped in gold-woven capes, their multiple chins trembling as they laughed and drank champagne. By their sides were wealthy heiresses, all of them wearing heavy makeup and looking smug. Look, there he is. Oh my God, he actually came. A sudden, sharp hush fell over the room as the double doors of the ballroom opened. Matteo walked in. He was wearing a custom-tailored midnight black tuxedo that accentuated his tall, lean frame and the broad, powerful slope of his shoulders. His dark hair was styled back, revealing the sharp, aristocratic lines of his face. He looked like an elven king who had wandered into a swamp of frogs. And beside him, holding his arm, was me. I wore a liquid silver gown that flowed around my body like water, my dark hair falling in soft curls over my shoulders. My eyes were bright and my skin carried a soft, luminous glow, a natural side effect of my recovering Nymphomist. Magic. Is that Cher Monroe? Why is she holding his arm so tightly? She looks happy. She must be desperate for his money, to stand next to a skeletal freak like him. A tall, rotund woman in a gold dress, the daughter of the Sinclair Group's chairman Evelyn Sinclair, marched toward us. Beside her was her husband, a man who was barely 5 feet tall and weighed at least 250 pounds. He had no neck, and his face was so round he looked like an angry bowling ball. Mr. Valencia, Evelyn sneered, her eyes scanning Matteo with pity and disgust. I must admire your courage. To show your face at an event of this caliber. It must be hard for you. She looked at me, a cold, mocking smile on her lips. And you must be Cher. I heard your family's company was failing. It must be truly exhausting to have to pretend to love a man who looks like this, just to save your father's business. Matteo's grip on my arm tightened. He stood rigid, his face turning a cold, stony gray as he prepared for the usual, humiliating insults. I didn't let him suffer. I stepped forward, my silver gown rustling, and let out a light melodic laugh that instantly cut through the tension in the room. Exhausting? I asked, my voice carrying a soft, magical resonance that made everyone in the ballroom stop and listen. Evelyn, darling, are you blind? Or do you just have a tragic lack of taste? Evelyn blinked, stunned. What? I turned to Matteo, reaching up to gently trace his cheek with my fingers. As my hand made contact, a soft silver shimmer of magic, invisible to human eyes but felt by everyone in the room as a sudden, breathtaking aura flashed around us. Look at his face, I said, my voice dropping into a soft, hypnotic register. His jawline is like chipped marble. His eyes are like deep, endless nights. And his body, it's a masterpiece of masculine strength. Your husband, on the other hand. I glanced at the bowling ball man beside her, a look of profound, genuine pity on my face. Looks like a greasy turnip that sat in a damp cellar too long. If that is what you call handsome in your family, Evelyn, then I suggest you invest some of your charity funds into a good eye clinic. The ballroom went dead silent. Evelyn's face turned a dark, bruised plum color. How dare you? You. Gold digging. Gold digging. I laughed, leaning in to press a passionate, lingering kiss directly onto Matteo's lips right in front of the entire crowd. The moment our lips met, a massive, roaring torrent of spirit energy surged from him into my source. The silver light of my magic flared, creating a warm, sweet-scented breeze that swept through the ballroom, making the flowers bloom, and the lights flicker with a soft, romantic glow. Matteo's eyes widened, his large hands immediately wrapping around my waist, pulling me against his hard chest as he kissed me back with a sudden wild and possessive hunger. The kiss lasted for what felt like an eternity. When we finally parted, the entire ballroom was in a state of absolute, stunned silence. The heiresses who had been mocking Matteo were now staring at him, with wide, confused, and suddenly flushing faces. The soft, magical aura of my Nymphomist charm had subtly shifted their perception. For the first time in their lives, they were seeing the raw, undeniable hotness of a real man. Matteo, I whispered, my lips brushing against his jaw. Let's go home. This place is boring. Yes, he breathed, his dark eyes burning with a sudden, intense fire that had nothing to do with corporate mergers. We turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the high society of the city standing in stunned, silent ruin. Back at the penthouse, the doors had barely closed behind us before Matteo pinned me against the wall. His large, warm hands were on either side of my head, his chest rising and falling in heavy, ragged breaths. Cher, he said, his voice a deep, rough baritone that made my knees go soft. Who are you? What are you doing to me? I'm Cher, I smiled, reaching up to untie his black bow tie. And I'm just a girl who knows what she wants. And right now, I want you. I don't care about the money, he whispered, his head leaning down, his lips brushing against my neck. I don't care about the merger. If this is a dream, Cher, don't wake me up. It's not a dream, Mateo, I said, my hands sliding beneath his tuxedo jacket, tracing the hard, perfect ridges of his abs. It's just the great Rite. And it's about to begin. As our lips met once more, the silver light of my Nymphomist magic flared throughout the entire penthouse, illuminating the glass tower like a brilliant, rising star. My source was fully restored, my magic was complete, and the most beautiful, hideous man in the world was finally beautifully mine.